I'm Gold Derby editor Daniel Montgomery here with Mynka Draper, the costume designer for Snowfall, a crime drama set in 1980s Los Angeles. Now, the 80s are so well known for their specific styles and trends, but it can be easy for a show or movie to veer almost into parody sometimes, which Snowfall never does. So how do you approach keeping the costumes and the story grounded?
I guess for me, I really start with the script, and I do a lot of I read the script. I do a lot of research into the characters. On Snowfall, we're addressing, a lot of different aspects of this sort of like drug epidemic that happened in Los Angeles in the 80s, how, the CIA was selling drugs in, inner cities to raise money for the illegal war in Nicaragua. So I did a lot of research, and I lived in LA in the 80s, frankly. So I kind of lived through some of it, which I think is helpful. But so I've done a lot of research into all the different groups. We start with, like sort of lower income African American communities. We also have like sort of like lower income Hispanic communities in Los Angeles. So like sort of the distinct looks of those sort of neighborhoods. We have the CIA. We have sort of this Israeli gun smuggling, drug dealing element. We go to like Costa Rica, we go to Nicaragua, we do all these different, very disparate types of groups. So I did like extensive research into all of them. As we get into the story, we get into a lot of the, gang culture of the Crips and the Bloods and sort of what, those really distinct looks are. So I did, a lot of research into that. We have the Cholos, and we have, I don't know. So I think, it begins with the script, and then the research, and then sort of like delving into like sort of the reality of the characters and the humans, really dressing for the story.
And there's that class aspect, where the characters kind of run the gamut of, struggling to wealthy.
Yeah.
And then you've got Franklin, who's kind of on the path between those. So
Yeah.
what's it like, developing the style of that character, and how are you working with Damson Idris to kind of create that?
Yeah, I mean, Damson is such a intuitive actor, and so he really feels in the clothes. The character of Franklin is like a very smart kid, who starts off, though he has lived, like in sort of, we show like sort of African American poverty in this certain part of Los Angeles. He's really smart, and he has been exposed to these different neighborhoods because of going to like, these schools where he like went to school in the Valley, and he met like the Valley sort of like middle class kids, and so I think he dresses in a way to be able to integrate and kind of blend with all different types of characters. So we've given him this very clean sort of preppy look. And as the seasons have gone on, these characters, started off with no money, and then they make like a lot of money really fast. And so that idea, like if you come from not really having anything, what's so important to you would be to sort of visually show that wealth, right? So we start by just like everybody goes shopping and gets, every time we see them, they're in new clothes, everything's clean, everything's pressed, everything's really together, because now they can, and so I feel like, we show Rob, who's our character that's like from the Valley. He comes from middle class, so he can have this sort of like kind of boho Tory uppy kind of vibe, because that for him is sort of like, he doesn't need to show that money because he's never not had it, so we kind of show how like what happens when groups of people just get so much money so fast. And that's been a really fun aspect to kind of like develop the characters and sort of how they would show that money, and also how money shows power in the world.
And then you've got a character like Teddy, who is the central CIA agent in the story. And the thing about a CIA agent is they kind of live to not be detected and not be noticed. So like how was your approach to designing for that character?
Well, that character is really interesting because he's almost like he starts off the beginning of the show. He's sort of like trying to discover how to be this sort of fake drug dealer. Like he's trying to figure out how to get into this world, and maybe he's not as good at it in the beginning. So his look was a little bit more awkward, and it was sort of subtle and kind of blendy, and sort of you see where he comes from, this sort of military and kind of just very simple background. So we gave him very simple, very classic clothes. But as the seasons have gone on, he's sort of fallen apart, and he's fallen into this lifestyle. And he's sort of like, you can see his disintegration of his character through the clothing, where he's becoming from more sort of this clean, kind of put together ex-military, CIA kind of blendy type character, where he feels goes a little more Serpico. He goes a little bit more native and a little bit more eccentric in a funny way, but also very subtle, very, doesn't stand out, in a crowd necessarily.
And what's the collaboration like with the production designer, Tomas Voth, the art department, working on, collaborating with colors and styles to make sure everything's cohesive?
Yeah, so we have a concept meeting and we have a production meeting where we discuss sort of what the different scenes are trying to do, and what how we're trying to push forward the narrative with visuals. So Tomas is really good. He does in his area like boards with sort of like mood boards of every different new set. Sometimes we're shooting in the same set, so I kind of know what it's already going to be like. So, just like really good communication, especially during COVID, is always quirky, but just really good communication about what type of character this set is conveying, and then how the clothes would push that forward. And then, color wise, either we're trying to create like a palette, or we're trying to, pop somebody from the background, so communication and kind of having a larger vision for the show that Dave Andron and previously John Singleton gave us.
And were the costumes for the show like mostly sourced? Were a lot created specifically for the show? I mean, it takes place in the not too distant past, so is there still access to?
Yeah, so there's a lot of costumes on this show and a lot of different types of groups. So we have gotten the clothing a lot of different types of ways. I did a ton of vintage shopping so that we have period pieces that feel, correct with tone and palette. And we, in this show, like we do a ton of aging and dying, because we show, poverty, and we also show these crackheads and just sort of the devastation that this drug brought to just this huge communities of people, and visually what that looks like. It's kind of shocking in a way, and we want to show that. So we do it for dramatic effect. So all those clothes are purchased. We rent some clothes from costume houses all over the city. We dress so many different people. We purchase a lot of stuff because there are so many stunts and there's so much violence and all that. With that, you need multiples. So we purchase kind of, really classic things that are still being worn from that time now. So we are, with our period correctness, and just make sure it's the proper fit. And then for our special moments, I create different clothing. Like one of the characters, Jerome, he's a more flamboyant, kind of fun character. So we've created some of his clothes, kind of like a lot of his stuff has been an homage to Dapper Dan, who was a designer of that period, who's just, and is still a designer, is super fabulous. And Louis, who's, one of our more glamorous, who shows, the glamour and the fun and the money, like those kind of characters we have created the clothing for, the costumes for.
And Jerome is one of the characters I feel like who you really get that sense of that specific period look, like the Jerry curl in the hair, and everything in the costumes. Is that you mentioned creating his costumes? Was that some of the most fun to get to develop that character?
Definitely. His character's one of my favorites. I mean, I love all the characters for all the different reasons, but because he is one of really the few characters that gets to show fun 80s, we're not showing, a lot of it is just not fun, let's face it. Avi is one, Jerome is one, and the actor who plays him is so amazing. Like, he really knows how to inhabit those clothes so that they do not feel like a character. It feels like this is that they're his character. His character is that kind of flamboyant and kind of peacock type a person. So yeah, he's really fun. Louis is so fun. Avi, our Israeli drug smuggler and arms dealer type character, is really fun. So yeah, it's I'm lucky on that show to be able to do just so many different types of people.
And you mentioned, COVID, and the show had a delay in production because of the pandemic. And of course, when you come back, things are different in terms of how you work on a set. And costuming is such an intimate process. I'm wondering how that affected your work once you came back on those last couple episodes.
Yeah. So we cross-board the show. So we probably shot like 6-7 episodes in pandemic, and yes, we collaborate really closely with the actors so that we make sure that the clothes are really, they're really inhabiting the costumes as if their character, that really brings that for them. And so again, communication that's, through Zooms opposed to maybe speaking in person, a lot of phone meetings. We were tested 3 times a week, as were the actors. So I did fit the actors still. But just tried to keep, things really distant and safe. And then on set, they kind of created these pods so that large groups of people weren't together. And I feel like our show did really well, considering, I mean, there's so many crew members, there's so many cast members, so many extras. Like, it was definitely challenging, but kind of met that challenge pretty well. And I'm assuming it's going to be the same for a while as far as shooting goes.
And those last few episodes of the season go to some very intense places. You have a funeral shootout. You have a lot of violence in these last few episodes in particular, and tension. And you mentioned having duplicates of things when you have scenes of violence. Obviously you need multiples. What were those last few episodes like to design for, and what were those unique challenges?
Well, yeah, another thing that COVID has brought is, everything's just slower. It's slower for shipping. You can't go to, for a while, you couldn't go to the mall, then you couldn't go to stores, then there's nothing in the stores. So it was all very challenging, honestly. And so I think, it's like it forces you to become even more creative, even more organized, even more kind of like specific about your intention of why you're doing things, because you don't have a lot of room to like mess around, So I have worked with the same team for a really long time, and we just, kind of got out there and made it happen. But yeah, it's a challenging time. And it's kind of funny when I go to stores, stuff still, like, you look around and you're like, there's nothing new out there. So you really have to dig deep.
And what are the challenges of designing for something period, like especially very recent past versus designing for a more contemporary set show?
Yeah, it's just we really, like, when I'm doing a period show, I want to make sure that I am not taking people out of the story by doing things that are not period correct, right? Like, we want to feel like we're in that story, and it really feels, we're evoking that feeling of that time. So, because I'm doing this 80s show, there's still a lot of classic clothing that we can get, and we rely on a lot of that kind of stuff. We're dealing with the Crips and the Blood, so it's a lot of that classic, like Dickies and workwear and pieces that are still around, thankfully. So, you know, and then if you, but like, let's say you're doing a period show that's from the 40s, you know, you basically have to make everything. So, and, you know, you can pull some stuff, but if you're doing molds and all that, you have to make it. I have to say, you know, even for our show now, there's these sort of new, fun, interesting technologies where you can recreate fabrics because it like you can print onto fabrics almost any kind of design, so you can kind of recreate even vintage pieces. So, you know, sort of starting to get into that is actually kind of a fun creative challenge, but again, you're just like digging deep. It takes a little longer, you have to work a little harder for it, and of course it's even more satisfying when it comes off well.
Well, I want to congratulate you on your work on the show, and you know, which has been renewed for another season, thankfully.
Yes,
And thank you so much for talking with me about it today. It's been a pleasure.
thank you, very nice to meet you, have a nice weekend.